How do you restore your catalyst switch to factory default settings? Well, if you were to go through your running config and make note of all the configuration changes you made, you would be able to reverse all those changes by typing in the no version of all those commands. That could take you a really long time. If I just rebooted the switch, would that set me back to factory default settings? No. Why? Because of a file stored in NVRAM called the startup configuration file. So wait a second. If the device boots and grabs a file from NVRAM called the startup config and loads that, so that way there it's not using factory default settings, what if I erased the startup configuration file from NVRAM and then reloaded the switch? Would I return to factory default settings? Yeah, that's exactly what would happen in that type of scenario. So let me show you how to erase the startup configuration file from NVRAM and reload a switch, all from the command line prompt. So the command is erase startup config. It is that simple. Erasing the NVRAM file system will remove all configuration files. Continue? Yes. Oh, all right. So now if we take a look at our startup config, show startup config, we'll see that there is no startup configuration file present. So what we're going to do now is we're going to type in the reload command, and we're going to reload the switch. Proceed with the reload. You bet we want to proceed with the reload, and it's too late now. I cannot back out of this reload, folks. So the switch is reloading, number one. And number two, I do not have a startup configuration file. So I want you to take a moment here while this switch is loading and think about what will show up once the switch has completely finished booting. What's going to show up? Think about it. What's happening right now? The switch found the operating system in Flash, and it's decompressing it right now. Once it's decompressed, it is loaded into random access memory. This case, we're using the Catalyst 2960 LAN-based K9 image. Pretty big file, as you can see. Now it's loading the operating system, putting it into random access memory. It's going through some testing, verifying that everything's okay. Everything's working properly from a hardware perspective on the device right now. That power on self-test, the post. We'll see that it's telling us there's cryptographic features on this particular device. And as a result of that, we must be careful if we choose to export this product, because the exportation of this product to countries that are not allowed to use those cryptographic features could result in some serious penalties. So we always want to keep that in mind. Do not export Cisco products without verifying that they're allowed into the specific country you're importing them into. Okay, now it's loading some of the interfaces, making its connections. We'll also see in this output that it is showing us the processor revision number, the motherboard that's on it, the virtual Ethernet interfaces, the fast Ethernet interfaces, the gigabit Ethernet interfaces, how much memory is currently available on this particular product. Showing us the base Ethernet MAC address, which is really important for various services that run on the switch. For example, Spanning Tree Protocol relies heavily on this base Ethernet MAC address. The assembly number of the motherboard, the power supply part number. So if at any point in time you need information about this product and what motherboard, what power supply, what revisions are we using, it's all right here in this output. So it might be a good idea to grab a snapshot of this, or you don't want to grab a snapshot of this, you could always use the show version command to verify that information as well. But let's get down now to hitting enter and see what happens. System configuration dialog. Why? Because we erased the startup configuration file in NVRAM. We're back to square one. We're back to factory default settings, meaning we're going to have to configure our switch from scratch.